Today, we are diving into one of the most unbelievable transformations in the history of music. We're talking about Pantera. This is the story of how a band with big hair and spandex completely rewrote the rules and became the kings of heavy metal, against all odds.
I mean, it's such a wild story, and it really all comes down to this one question, right? How on earth did a Texas hair band become the undisputed, most dominant heavy metal act of the 1990s? Well, let's get into it.
And just look at this. This says it all. On one side, you've got Pantera in the mid-'80s, full-on glam rock, looking like they just stepped off the Sunset Strip. And then on the other side, not even a decade later, they are a completely different animal. Just raw, aggressive, and absolutely brutal. The change is, well, it's staggering. So to really understand how a shift this massive was even possible, we got to go back to the beginning, to their unlikely origins in Texas, where it turns out they had a secret weapon. You see, the heart and soul of Pantera was always the Abbott brothers, Vinnie Paul on the drums and his younger brother Darrell on guitar. And that secret weapon? Well, their dad was a country music engineer who owned his own recording studio. So think about it. While all the other teenage bands are fumbling around in their garage with a cheap 4-track, the Abbotts had the keys to a professional studio. They were basically mastering the art of sound production before they even got a record deal. And having that studio access meant they could pump out a whole series of independent albums in the mid-'80s. And yeah, they were all firmly planted in that glam metal style. But if you listen closely, especially to Darrell's guitar playing, you can hear something else brewing. The riffs were getting heavier, more complex with every record. They were perfecting their craft. They were just doing it in the wrong genre.
And then came the real turning point. It's 1986, and the band brings in this 18-year-old kid from New Orleans, a vocalist named Philip Anselmo. Now, Phil wasn't into the whole Kiss and Van Halen scene. Nope. He grew up on the pure aggression of hardcore punk and the punishing speed of thrash metal. He was the final ingredient they desperately needed.
Okay, so with Anselmo in the band, the final piece of the puzzle just clicks into place. They weren't going to copy trends anymore. No, they were about to invent their very own subgenre of metal, what we now know as power groove.
And their commitment to this new vision got put to the test almost immediately. Darrell, who was already a guitar prodigy, gets offered the lead guitar spot in Megadeth. I mean, this is a life-changing gig, but he turned it down. The only catch was that Megadeth had to hire his brother Vinnie on drums too. When they said no, the brothers knew what they had to do. They decided to go all in on Pantera.
And their new vision was for this sound we now call groove metal. Here's the best way to think about it. Thrash metal is like a 100-meter sprint. It's all about pure, relentless speed. But groove metal? That's more like a heavyweight boxer's swagger across the ring. It's powerful, it's rhythmic, it's heavy as hell. It's a mid-tempo punch that you can really feel in your chest. And their major label debut, Cowboys from Hell, was basically the blueprint. You had Dimebag's super heavy, bluesy riffs, Vinnie's insane, syncopated drumming, Phil's raw, barking vocals, and that signature guitar tone. They got that sound with a ton of gain and a mid-scooped EQ, which basically means they carved out the middle frequencies to make the sound sharper, heavier, and just meaner.
This new sound, it didn't just get them noticed. It let them completely take over a decade that was supposed to be the death of heavy metal.
All right, I want you to think about one number, 79. That's how many weeks their 1992 album, Vulgar Display of Power, spent on the Billboard charts. Now you have to remember the timing here. This was the exact moment that grunge was exploding and supposedly killing off heavy metal for good. And how does Pantera respond? By releasing one of the most brutal, uncompromising albums ever made. And it was a massive hit. They weren't just surviving the 90s, they were owning them.
But believe it or not, that wasn't even their peak. So in 1994, with grunge at its absolute peak, Pantera unleashes an even more extreme album, Far Beyond Driven, and it debuts at #1 on the Billboard charts. An album this heavy had absolutely no business being #1 in America. It was just proof that their sound was so powerful, so undeniable, that even the mainstream couldn't ignore it.
And a huge piece of that sound was Dimebag's gear. You know, he famously rejected the warm, classic tube amps that everyone else was using and instead went with solid-state Randalls. This gave him this clinical, razor-sharp attack that was just perfect for their rhythmic precision. And then he'd use these EQs to scoop out all the mid-range, creating that iconic chainsaw tone that everybody tried to copy.
But right as their success was hitting its absolute peak, the pressure started to build.
and the band began to tear itself apart from the inside out.
In this timeline, it just shows how that incredible success curdled into this slow, painful disintegration. It really started with Phil Anselmo's chronic back pain, which led him to a heroin addiction, and that created this huge distance between him and the rest of the band. I mean, things got so bad he recorded all his vocals for an entire album by himself, down in New Orleans. After a near-fatal overdose in '96, the trust was just gone. By the early 2000s, they weren't even talking, and in 2003, the Abbott brothers officially pulled the plug.
What came next was the truly tragic final chapter of the original band's story, one that would cement their legacy in the most unthinkable way.
On December 8, 2004, the unthinkable happened. Dimebag Darrell was murdered on stage while performing with his and Vinny's new band. Just like that, any hope of a Pantera reunion was extinguished in the most horrific way imaginable.
The fallout from this tragedy was huge, and it went far beyond the band. It fundamentally changed the live music industry forever. You know, before this, security at a lot of clubs was pretty lax. But afterward, metal detectors and pat-downs became standard practice all across the country. That was a direct result of what happened that night.
And then, in 2022, the story took a very unexpected turn. The surviving members, Phil Anselmo and Rex Brown, decided to bring Pantera back to the stage. They enlisted two legends, Zakk Wylde on guitar and Charlie Benante on drums, to fill the absolutely immense shoes of the Abbott brothers. And while it's been a huge commercial success, the move has been, to say the least, highly controversial. It's forced fans everywhere to ask if it can truly be Pantera without its founding creative core.
And that really brings us right up to today, to the central question of their modern era. Is this new lineup a genuine celebration of a powerful, important legacy, or is it more of a high-profile tribute act, performing without its key visionaries? You know, there's no easy answer here, and it's a debate that ensures the very complicated, very powerful story of Pantera is still being written.